So Millie Zantow, you've read a bit about her. I'll just read one of my one-line comment in the bio. With tenacity and enthusiasm, Millie Zantow helped launch the recycling revolution in Wisconsin and in the nation. She helped invent the recycling triangle, at least the numbers that went in it, as a system that's now used globally to identify different plastics and to promote recycling throughout the world. She also helped with the 1990 Wisconsin recycling law, which was deemed the best in the nation at that time. I highlighted in a quote that's actually on her plaque. She and her legacy continue every day as citizens recycle their daily waste, as teachers in schools teach the 3 R's of reduce, reuse, and recycle. And thirdly, as municipalities and as businesses and as industries work together to create a recycling program for our nation. So every time we use something, we have to recognize that it really helped us to use those resources again. Oftentimes our field is always searching for new resources, raw resources, and oftentimes we don't look back and realize the resources are already in our pocket. Just reuse them and you can protect nature far better. With that, I'd like to recognize Jesse Haney and Elise Mosier for submitting the nomination materials. Jesse isn't here, I don't think, but Elise is, and she's also produced a... Is Jesse here by chance? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, thank you very much for coming. Elise Mosier wrote this book, What Millie Did, a children's version of that great legacy. So another example of what I would call great environmental education, moving forward the importance of recycling and conservation. We have John Reindl, who had worked with Millie. He's the former DNR recycling coordinator for Wisconsin and also was the Dane County recycling manager. Liz Neville was a friend of Millie, worked with her in the Sauk County Recycling Center and also worked with UW Extension in Sauk County. And Jude Stevens, the daughter-in-law of Millie, she will speak just for a few minutes about the family of Millie Zantow. If I can get the three of you to come up quickly, and I think I know them well enough that I'm just going to say, John, you know the drill, we have to get out of here.
I brought my own timer too.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for this honor to induct Millie Zantow. I also appreciate the great size of the crowd here. I was here back in 1983 helping to induct John Muir, and the crowd is much larger today than it was some 34 years ago. Millie's perhaps a really unusual choice to be inducted in the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame. She didn't deal with plants. She didn't deal with animals. She protected no wild lands or wild waters or waters of the world. What she did was recycling, which was my former profession, and is why I was invited to speak. She's one of the very select group of people that has impacted every one of our lives in Wisconsin every single day, because she instituted the recycling of post-consumer plastics, especially plastic containers. Wisconsin had long recycled metal and glass and paper. We were leaders in the country, for example, in paper recycling. But when Wisconsin was looking for its mandatory recycling law, there was the opportunity to recycle plastics only because Millie developed it. I'm going to skip over some of the materials that I had, but basically Millie started this because as a volunteer for the International Crane Foundation, she got to represent ICF at a meeting in Japan that included the Emperor of Japan. And Millie noticed that on the streets of the cities, especially Tokyo, people had put out recyclables every single day, clean material that could be made into new products. Every day was a different material. When Millie came back to Sauk County, Wisconsin, she learned that their landfill only had 3 years, was filling up, and it would take about 3 years to develop a new landfill. Millie thought, why can't we do recycling here? She actually went to the landfill, sat at the landfill, counted the number of trucks that were coming in, and found out what materials were on those trucks. Realized the paper could recycle, the metal could recycle, but there were no markets for plastics. Millie thought that had to be changed. She called up Borden's milk company in Milwaukee and said, what do you do in your production line with the glass, with the plastic bottles that are deformed, that can't be used? And they said, oh, we just grind them up and throw them back in the production process. Light went on Millie's brain. She knew some people with a plastics company. The Sowie family owned Flambeau Plastics in Baraboo. She called up her friends there and said, can you recycle the plastics? And the guy said, well, yeah, technically we can, but it has to be sorted by grade and it has to be ground up. So Millie thought, I wonder what I can do there. She went to UW Baraboo and worked with professors to figure out how they could identify plastics, whether they would float or sink in water, what kind of scratches would produce on the plastics. And one of the tests was a burn test. You take a little bit of plastics, burn it, see what was coming off of it, what it smelled like, and therefore identified it. She then convinced a friend of hers, Jenny Ells, to cash in her life insurance policy along with Millie doing the same thing. It wasn't much, $5,000 in those days, but it was enough to go and buy an industrial grinder. And she and Jenny took a pickup truck to get that grinder. In the book, it talks about the workers at the factory laughing at these two grandma-type people taking an industrial grinder back to who knows where in Sauk County. But Millie persisted, and I met her when I worked for the University of Wisconsin Extension. My job was basically to take the information from the university professors and extend the boundaries of the university to the boundaries of the state. Millie was very persistent. Millie was very gentle. She reminded me of my mother. She was also very persistent. And she let me volunteer with her in sorting the plastics. I learned so much more from her than I learned from anybody else. And with her mentorship, I learned information that I could add to what the faculty knew to take to the people throughout the state of Wisconsin. Now, why is Millie in the Conservation Hall of Fame? Because recycling conserves. Millie was most concerned about conserving the landfill, but we in the recycling field, years later, realized, well, that was a great educational tool. The real benefit of recycling is not only conserving resources, but the energy and the pollution involved in extracting the resources and manufacturing the product. And for example, 10 years after Millie started, the amount of plastics recycling was, post-consumer plastics, was 500,000 tons, basically because Millie had got this going. 2 years ago, the quantity was up to 3.5 million tons, so a 7-fold increase. One of the studies has shown that for every ton of plastics recycled, you save the energy equivalent in 1,000 to 2,000 gallons of gasoline. So the plastics recycled a few years ago was equal to 3.5 to 7 billion gallons of gasoline energy. That's the conservation that Millie helped do. In addition, there was an article in the Washington Post just this week that there were 300 billion pieces of plastic scrap in the Arctic Ocean. Recycling is a means to keep the plastic out of the environment and to prevent those things from happening. Millie is a true example of what Margaret Mead said many years ago, that it is truly a small, dedicated group of people who can change the world. This is what Millie really is nominated for the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame doing, conserving the resources that protect the environment. I want to add to what Joe said about this book. This book is an excellent publication by Elise Mosier. It really captures the spirit of Millie, and I highly recommend it. But at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Liz Nevers. Thank you.
planned to say good morning, but I think it's good afternoon. It is my privilege to introduce you to a truly extraordinary woman, Millie Zantow. As John mentioned, to help solve a local solid waste problem, Millie pioneered post-consumer plastics recycling and ended up having a worldwide impact. You all know on plastics containers now, you turn it over and there's that number 1 through 7. Millie developed that identification number. But more importantly, she got the plastics container manufacturers, the plastic industry, government officials and agencies, including EPA and the municipal solid waste community, to believe that post-consumer plastics could be collected, sorted, and processed into a marketable, recycled feedstock. And unlike most of your inductees, Millie did not have a PhD. Millie did not even have a college degree. She did not belong, she was not a staff member of a government agency. She was not a member of industry. She was what I think Wisconsin has often done best, a citizen activist who saw a problem and moved forward, was the visionary who could see a way to do it and pulled the rest of us along with her. She was truly a unique person. But before I talk further about my relationship with Millie, I want to introduce you all to Millie and to her partner, Jenny L., via video done in 2009 by then environmental grad student Lise Stark from the Gaylord Nelson Institute. Lisa's video is called Plastics 1 through 7 and can be found on YouTube. This is a short clip from her longer video, which I encourage you to watch. Millie is the silver-haired woman with glasses, so let's look at that video.
These are the bottles that we recycled in the end. I don't really remember how we got, I mean, you had the idea, but I don't remember exactly when you brought it up to me.
Well, I think one of the evenings when you and John, when he and Woody were working on their still. That was 79. We were both so busy. When we got into it, we went all the way. I mean, we did everything.
That was 6 days a week.
Right. And then if we had a good March wind, it was 7 days a week because I chased the stuff all the way up to the mountain as it blew away. I started studying up the different plastics and why weren't they recycling the plastics. I called the Board and Milk Company in Milwaukee and asked them about their bottles and how they were processed. And they said, well, if we have a mistake, we just put it back in and reblow it. And I said, oh, they are recyclable. And they said, oh, yes. At the time, there was no classification as to whether it was polystyrene, high-density polyethylene, low-density polyethylene, or what. We came up with the idea of a little imprint on the bottom of every container, a little triangle emblem with a number inserted in it, and that would identify what the plastic was, 1, 2, 3 on them. And so I was real happy when that went through, and nowadays everybody can see that.
And how different is it today?
Well, when I was a kid, they didn't have plastic.
Millie was like. And as I said, she was a remarkable woman. Now she is known for her pioneering work in plastics recycling. But before that, she was active in the field of endangered species conservation. She was the first administrator for the nascent International Crane Foundation, or ICF, in Baraboo, where Millie worked as a full-time volunteer alongside founders George Archibald and Ron Sowie. When ICF got onto a solid financial footing and could afford to pay for staff, Millie moved into the recycling field. And John has already told you why. After a visit to Japan where she'd seen all this recycling, Sauk County had a landfill crisis. So, but the first time I met Millie was when she walked into a service club I belonged to in Baraboo, carrying 2 plastic bags full of garbage. So you've got this service club full of women sitting there and a woman with garbage. And she proceeded to pull out different household trash items and talk about how they could be recycled, including plastics containers, thereby saving our county landfill space and also conserving non-renewable resources. After her presentation, several of us were so inspired by what Millie had talked about that we got together and said, we've got to help this woman. What we decided to work on was outreach and educational materials aimed at local officials and Sauk County citizens. To this end, we developed a slideshow called Solid Waste Issues in Sauk County and highlighted the role that recycling could play in handling our municipal solid waste. Now, this was in pre-PowerPoint days. So we had to use 35 millimeters film, write out on poster board our script and photograph it, to make the text slides, and put together several slide carousels. Some of you may remember those devices, with a companion script for use in schools, libraries, and more importantly, local government meetings. Several of us started giving that presentation to help Millie out, including myself. And as John mentioned, I soon had the opportunity to volunteer down at Easy Recycling, the recycling facility Jenny and she had started. And I learned how to sort plastics. I scraped up labels off of milk jugs, which we had to do at the beginning. I could run a baler and bale paper and cardboard, and I could break glass into cullet, one of my favorite activities. You got to throw it into the balers, into the boxes. Although Millie's greatest legacy is how she developed post-consumer plastics recycling, Easy Recycling handled all types of recyclables, including glass, aluminum, metal, newspaper, and cardboard, and eventually served small communities and the larger cities in all of Sauk County. Within a year after meeting Millie, a group of us had formed a grassroots organization to encourage the development of local recycling programs. And our focus was primarily on local government officials. I was the chair and of course worked closely with Millie. We talked to the Solid Waste Committee of the county board, worked with the county landfill manager, worked with town boards and city councils, and even sponsored workshops for waste haulers, your local garbage truck guys. For years, Millie and I traveled around the county and the state giving presentations on the benefits of recycling. Within 2 years, that grassroots group evolved into a 501c3 called Wisconsin Intercounty Nonprofit Recycling, or WINTER, which took over the actual processing operation at Easy Recycling. And we hired staff, we got grants, we did fundraisers. When I decided to enter graduate school at the Institute for Environmental Studies, now called the Gaylord Nelson Institute, in 1987, I decided I was going to get a master's degree in garbage. All because of Millie. And I have my master's in land resources, like Christine, Dr. Thompson here, in Thomas, in solid waste and recycling. And as part of my master's thesis research on post-consumer polystyrene recycling, I did part of my research at the old Easy Recycling plant, now known as Winter. John has already told you that you can learn even more about Millie and how she did it in this book, and I certainly encourage you to read it. For me, Millie was an inspiration. She was a mentor and a true pioneer. She was also one of the most amazing people I've ever known or worked with. Visionary, yet with a common touch. Hardworking, modest, amazingly persistent, or as she liked to say, Oklahoma bulldog stubborn, and a truly kind and good person. She could inspire others with her vision, and she also mobilized citizens, government officials, and industry leaders. I believe she has been one of the unsung conservation heroes of Wisconsin and the U.S., and I am deeply grateful to the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame for inducting her this spring. Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Jen Stevens, and I do know that all of you have lunch on your mind, or the bathroom. So I'm going to keep my remarks short. I'm Millie's daughter-in-law, and we're here with her family today, and we're very honored that Millie has been inducted into the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame. She was the most amazing woman I've ever known. I want to share with you just a few stories and a little bit about Millie. She grew up in the Great Depression in Oklahoma on a farm. If that doesn't say it all, I don't know what does. They had to use literally everything. Nothing could go to waste, and they grew almost everything that they needed. And that was really part of, what led Millie to, she didn't know words like conservation. It was just simply a way of life to use everything and care for the land. I met Millie when I met her son. They were living in the Baraboo Hills near Devil's Lake State Park. And so one of the first things I remember is they lived at the top of a hill, and this was in the days when people would go up to Wisconsin Dells and Baraboo for vacations, and inevitably their cars would overheat and die at the top of the hill. Millie's family kept containers of water by the door for people who had problems with their car, and it always seemed to happen on a Friday evening as people were heading up for the weekend. And it became normal this would happen at dinner, we would go outside, help the person, tell them, come on in. We'd set a place at the table, and they'd look at us because they were from Chicago, and they would look at us like, this is very strange. But there were no strangers in Millie's life. She was that kind of person and that kind of neighbor. She was the most determined person. She had a way of getting what she wanted without ever being rude or mean to someone. And I think it was like what John said. She was everyone's mother. When she was a volunteer at the International Crane Foundation, George Archibald was in Iran, and I don't remember what happened. There was some sort of political turmoil in Iran, imagine that. And George was trapped in the country, and he contacted Millie and wanted her to help him get out. And so she called the State Department, and she wanted to talk to Henry Kissinger, and they said, well, he's in London. And she said, well, give me his number. And they said, who are you? And she explained, and they said, well, we can't do that. And she said, well, you must have his number, right, in case you need to reach him. I mean, isn't this what the State Department does? Don't they help people in these situations? And somehow through this gentle yet incredibly persistent way, they gave her Henry Kissinger's phone. And when she dialed it, Henry answered the phone. I'm not making this up. And she got George out. So that was pretty amazing. Before she started doing recycling, there was a call throughout churches in America to help sponsor Vietnamese from after the Vietnamese War, people who would help the Americans and were in danger. Millie and her family sponsored not one person, not two, but 5. They paid for 5 Vietnamese refugees to come to this country. And they got them all on their feet with jobs and housing. 2 of them lived with Millie's family for a couple of years. And when they got on their feet and had a family of their own, they named their children the same as her sons. If that's not an honor, I don't know what is. I still remember when Millie came home and we were standing in the dining room of the farmhouse and Millie said, "I'm going to turn in my life insurance and buy a plastics grinder." And as a young, actually botany major myself, I thought, wow, this is so cool. And Mom, you're kind of nuts. That's the end of my stories, but I just want to say she was a remarkable woman. The book up here, I don't get any money for the book. The book is really, truly phenomenal. Buy it for yourself, your daughters, your children. Millie, it was her determination and vision and genuine caring that led her to do what she did. I heard a saying recently that I think just embodies Millie that I'll leave you with. It's amazing what you can accomplish when you don't care who gets the credit.
Finish this induction, and then we do have people with instruments wanting to make a lot of noise in here, so we have to get out of here soon.
Well, again, it's such an honor to be able to present this citation of commendation from the state legislature to somebody so inspirational. Whereas Millie was one of the first people in America to begin sorting consumer plastics, and she identified the problem of plastic waste and municipal solid waste and demonstrated that it was possible to recycle post-consumer plastics. And whereas Millie's tireless efforts to promote plastics recycling at the local and state level led to a significant policy change in 1990, the Wisconsin Recycling Act, which mandated plastics recycling statewide, and Wisconsin's new recycling law was considered the most comprehensive state recycling program in the country at the time. And whereas Millie's contributions to her community went far beyond recycling, she was a volunteer at the Sauk Prairie Memorial Hospital and for Meals on Wheels, and served as the first administrator of the International Crane Foundation in Baraboo, where she volunteered daily with founders George Archibald and Ron Downey. And whereas known by her friends and family as an inspiration, mentor, and true pioneer, Millie was hardworking, modest, persistent, and kind, and was known to inspire others while keeping an open mind to others' ideas and strengths. Now, therefore, the members of the Wisconsin legislature do hereby commend Mildred Louise Zantow for her tremendous life accomplishments and honor her and her family for her induction into Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame.
So, also we have a replica of that for your family.
Thank you.
Share it with Woody.
That's beautiful.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
I want to again thank Katrina for getting the legislative citations and for presenting them here today. And for Jude's remarks, I wish I had known Millie. I think I would have seen in her my grandmother and my mother, who had some of the same spirit of community service and friendship.